Good morning.
Good morning, Prof. Michael. How are you?
How are you? Nice to meet you.
I'm very fine. I hope you're doing well.
Everything okay, no problem with that. Like the normal problems we had at the moments, you see, with the pandemic, of course, with the pandemic situation, but for us as professors, it's not such a big problem.
All
But
right.
it's nice to meet you. Next time we will meet um, in person. I've never been in Medan before, but I want to come in the next future, of course, when it's
I'll wait.
possible again.
I'll wait for you. All right. I have a lot of questions on regarding of law, especially when we relate it with the social media. So I have come up with this title today for our podcast, which is "Freedom of Speech in Our Fingertips." So today, it's not our mouth anymore who's using the freedom of speech, but it's our fingertips now because we're very much locked at home, especially in Germany where the COVID cases are rising, and then around the world, people are now using their freedom of speech, but using their fingertips. So first of all, in this very globalized world, how do we balance this freedom while also follow the certain specific laws on uh, saying that there's a limit to this freedom of speech?
That's a very good question, and thank you again for the invitation. And of course, we don't have these borders anymore in the internet, of course. Yeah, we can talk with each other. Um, Although I'm in Germany at the moment and you are in Indonesia,
Yeah,
and that the same with the internet and the discussions we have in the internet. And we have a misbalance in a sense, because on the one hand, we have more freedom than ever before
I
in the internet, in the virtual world. That the one side, but on the other hand, it was never easier to control people, as you can see from different examples in China or Russia or other countries where governments can block pages, where they can control internet traffic. And it's also a problem of big internet firms. It's not only states, but it's also that we are controlled by Google, Facebook, and other companies. So we have this miscarriage. On the one hand, more freedom. On the other hand, um, more possibilities to limit the freedom of speech. And so it's really important to have something together between the countries, how to organize freedom of speech in the internet. But that's a problem at the moment. We even have this problem in the European Union that you have different attitudes towards the freedom of speech or what is covered by it. So at the moment, it's really a problem how much freedom should be allowed. And on the other hand, um, what are, for example, what has to be blocked in the internet. It couldn't be that everything is allowed in the internet, of course. So we have also restrictions in Germany on it. And so at the moment, it is really difficult to find a legal resolution, a legal solution on it. It is more at the moment that society must come back to the point that they must agree on certain basic assumptions. At the moment, we have a really, I don't know how it is in Indonesia, but we have a really weird discussion about vaccination in Germany at the moment.
I see.
You know that we have enough um, for vaccination, the whole, all inhabitants in Germany. We have enough from all the stuff. Nevertheless, you have a lot of so-called unconventional thinkers, and they can post whatever they want in the internet because there is no limit.
Yeah.
For example, they claim that vaccinations against corona cause serious damages and that Bill Gates is implementing microchips to people.
That has been there since the first. Yeah.
Have you heard about it? Do
Yeah.
you have people in Indonesia also arguing that they won't get vaccinated because of Bill Clinton?
We have people complaining without data, without certain argument. Lucky for Germans, they have the argument that oh, there are rumors that there are chips in the vaccine. In Indonesia, they simply think it's you'll die because of the vaccines.
So it's better to have a microchip than to die. That's true.
Exactly.
But you see, it's really difficult to strike a balance at the moment. On the one hand, you have the national legislations. And on the other hand, you have the opportunity that more and more people can use their freedom of speech. As you have seen in Belarus, for example, or in Kazakhstan at the moment, it's so important to have a free internet in a way. Sorry. But on the other hand, there must be some control on it. And there you have different national standards.
Yeah.
You see religious standards and political standards, and you have even differences between the European countries and also with the US. In Germany, we have in general a high degree of freedom of speech. But on the other hand, of course, you have always, yes, governmental entities who would like to restrict it and to block websites, for example. But how can we argue against China when we start to block websites? So we must go to find a different system how to control, or not how to control, but how to find a framework for the freedom of speech in the internet. And that must be done by society. I think it couldn't be done by law.
And as a professor of law, you see, there's this slogan that says, "Let justice be served even when the skies fall, when heavens fall." So, looking at through this term, there are a lot of skies which have fell. We can say the skies as the groups of people, the groups of activists, the group of innocent people. So they have fell, but still justice has not been served in many parts of the world. Let's say today we're seeing China's humanitarian crisis. You know what's happening in Kazakhstan recently, what's happening in Myanmar. So, what do you think is the biggest problem of today's justice system? Is it the implementation? Because if we see that all the laws, they're very much concrete laws, but implementation, it has bias, it has favoritism, nepotism, even.
I think the biggest problem is that we have an enforcement deficit. You see that you have all the nice rules and that you have a lot of legislation on it, and then you have a deficit to enforce it in the countries. And of course, you need a huge social power, because the written law is the one hand, the other hand is how to implement it, how to enforce it. And so on the other hand, you must see, although, for example, China is blocking web pages and they want to control what Apple is doing in China and all these stuff. So you have a lot of fears for freedom of speech. On the other hand, they can't control everything. On the other hand, ideas are coming into China or into Russia. I have been quite often in Russia. It's a beautiful country. It's a great country with great people. And of course, they have a lot of control in the country, but on the other hand, you can't control everything in the internet. I mean, you see it in Indonesia as well. You should be taken away from some web pages. What are your colleagues doing? They install VPN channels on there because you don't want to be controlled.
Yeah.
And you want to come around some locations in the internet. I think it's the same in China and other countries that they can control a lot of it, but on the other hand, they can't control everything. So the people get ideas about freedom and what to do, and you don't have such a control in China as you have, for example, in North Korea or other countries.
Yeah.
At least.
So, to what extent do you think our implementation of that freedom of speech, as we're normal global citizens, because we have the freedom, you see, if we see politics in the internet, then we disagree to certain candidates in an election, or we see our government, our chancellor, our prime minister, our president is doing something that we disagree, then we tend to be brought up by emotion. So some people, they do express their feelings in a very severe way in terms of, it will reach discrimination in the internet, also spreading hoax. So do you think to what extent is the caliber or limit of our freedom of speech, let's say commenting on the internet? What is the
I think that's the most important question, of course, and we're discussing it a lot of time. And it's not only in a political dimension, but it's also um, in an economic dimension. You see whether you allow people to act in the internet and what are they allowed to do. Because in Germany, we have some legislations how to control host providers, and what are the not to control them, but how they should act when they have, for example, um, when they host some web pages where you can discuss subjects. Then you have a degree of control you should have about it. So what would you say? What are the limits?
I think the limits will be when, because every country has different standards of such limits. While in terms of, when they have this blasphemy, or when they hurt certain religious, when they discriminate certain religious teachings, certain culture, certain ethnics, I think that should be a limit where it is more towards not only individual identity which is being discriminated, but also the national, cultural, religious, or even global identities should not be tolerated in the internet. But even now, if we see, it's already in the smaller cases. It's not only about politics. It's not only about vaccines. It's not about religion. But even in young kids, they have cyberbullying today, and it's very tragic actually, because uh, what I think is that I think we lack of education on how to
That's true.
limit
I
ourselves,
agree.
on how to protect ourselves in the internet. Because if the government implements certain laws of when we do wrong things, when we're guilty, but we were at first guilty because we do not know what is right and what is wrong, I think that's a problem. We're not educated well on using the internet.
That's really true. I realize it with my kids. They are very young. They are 9 and 7, but nevertheless they already um, use iPad and iPhone and all the other stuff because their friends also do so. But nevertheless, um, there's a lack of education, as you already said, how to use it.
Yeah.
What are uh, um, my rights? What are my limits? It's not everything what is allowed should be allowed, you see, or should be done. So, but from a legal point of view, I think that law becomes less important in the future. At least in the internet, in the global world, it is more a kind of self-regulation between groups, for example, universities, something like that. That's why we connect each other, so many universities worldwide, so that we can find a standard together. Or you have other organizations who try to organize something via the internet and then to find their own standard. There's a very good book you should read from several decades ago, Code as Code from Lawrence Lessig. I don't know whether you've heard about it.
No.
Code as code. It means that the code is regulated by the internet code, by the program code. You see, this is legislation in the future, and we can find some new laws, of course, to restrict the access to the internet. And of course, you will still have cases in courts. We have internet cases every day in court that somebody is claiming that his rights were um, 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 offensed in the internet. But these are only the small cases. As you said, it's only the case on everyday basis. But this huge protection or this huge way how to deal with the internet can only be done by people connected all over the world, or at least in Asia or in Europe or America or so. Code is code.
Yeah.
The law is regulated by the program code.